All right, with all of that out of the way, I am pleased to welcome today's speakers and pass things off to Jackie to get things started. Take it away, Jackie.
Thanks for the introduction, Annie, and welcome everyone virtually to the Auraria campus. I wish we could be together in person today, but we're going to do our best to pretend that we're there. So once Aaron, want to do next slide, Aaron? So this is the course description. I'm not going to run through it since you've all seen it if you signed up on the Eventbrite page. Next slide. But just to cover some of the learning objectives we hope to touch on today, we're going to explore sustainability programs taking place on the Auraria campus, articulate the evolutions in LEED as we've seen them evolve in LEED buildings on the Auraria campus over the last 15 years. Hopefully you'll walk away with an understanding of the LEED credit categories and how they were pursued with tactics across these 4 buildings we're going to highlight today. If you are a student that's not familiar with LEED, or anyone on the call unfamiliar with LEED, you can go to the USGBC website and download the checklist to kind of follow along and see what we're talking about. And then finally, we will learn about the integration of sustainability program, site, and economy for the buildings we're speaking about. So my name, as I said, is Jackie Slocum. I'm the Sustainability Manager here at the Auraria campus, and I will be taking us through the first section, giving some context on Auraria, but I'll let my fellow panelists here introduce themselves now, starting with John.
John, you're muted.
Sorry. Hi, I'm John Everin. I'm a Senior Associate at Anderson Mason Dale. I will be talking later about the Auraria Science Building.
I'm David Schaefer. I'm a principal at Oz Architecture, and I'm excited to share with you some of the work we did at CCD at their Confluence building.
Hi, I'm Aaron Hillhouse. I'm a principal with Anderson Mason Dale, and I'll be presenting the MSU Denver Aerospace and Engineering Sciences building.
Hello, everyone, and I'm Stephen Hall, a Senior Associate at Anderson Mason Dale, and I'm really excited to show you the project CU Denver, the Lola and Rob Salazar Student Wellness Center.
Awesome. Thank you all. Next slide, Aaron. So just to get a sense of who all is in the room, if you could use the raise your hand feature to let us know if you're familiar with the Auraria campus tri-institutional model or if you've been on campus before. So if you don't have the participant pane up, there's a little people bubble in the bottom right, and you can raise your hand. Looks like people are figuring it out. Looks like quite a few of you. Oh, I have to expand this to see. Maybe about 50%. Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, Aaron. The reason I ask is because any of you that have been on campus know that we have a really unique campus model. We have 3 academic institutions sharing this one Auraria campus, and they're all supported by the Auraria Higher Education Center. So the Auraria Sustainable Campus Program, which is where I work, is the student fee-funded tri-institutional sustainability program. So we sit at AHEC, which AHEC is a state entity that's essentially the landlord for campus, manages the buildings in any of the shared spaces. And we are funded by an $8.51 student fee each semester. So if you want to learn more about our projects and programs or see the actual physical location of all of our LEED buildings, you can head to our website. We have a brand new map that one of our graduate students just developed that highlights those features, and you can learn more about our projects and programs. But generally speaking, we work across 7 pillars as they're outlined in our bylaws by that student referendum. You can see that in many ways they sort of mirror the LEED credit categories that we're going to be talking about today. But there are 2 overarching themes that aren't explicitly listed in our pillars that are worth mentioning as they play pretty heavily into this conversation and into our work at the ASCP. First, our focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions across our campus activities. We're currently working on rewriting our climate action plan and reestablishing some greenhouse gas reduction benchmarks for campus to replace those you see listed at the top of the page. And secondly, a theme of social sustainability and equity. Much like this has been an increasing focus within the LEED checklist, the ASCP has also been trying to step into this national conversation we're having right now around social and environmental justice by helping to educate ourselves and our community about the rich cultural history of the Auraria campus, who came before us on this land, and some of the injustices that occurred to make way for higher ed in Denver. So I'll try to go through this quickly because there are quite a few more slides left, but essentially, anyone in the Denver area may know that during the urban renewal period in the 60s and 70s, Denver recognized the need to provide higher education opportunities for a burgeoning workforce. So the Auraria neighborhood, which was at the time predominantly a Hispanic and Latino working class neighborhood, had suffered from recent natural disasters, including a large flood, and was deemed blighted and in need of renewal by the Urban Renewal Authority. So that classification provided the justification for rebuilding this space in the form of a higher ed campus. However, it resulted in the displacement of that entire community, largely against their will. So you can see on the right-hand side here, St. Cajetan's Church, which was a gathering place for that community and a hub of resistance during the planning of the campus. It remains intact today, though it no longer holds services, along with 2 other churches and 13 19th century historic buildings in an effort to preserve the character of the original neighborhood. On the left here, you can see that even before the Auraria neighborhood existed, this space was occupied by Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes that used the confluence between the Platte and the Cherry Creek as a campsite. And eventually they were pushed out to make way for mining camps, which eventually transformed Auraria into a mix of industrial and residential zoning, which is depicted in the middle photo here, with lots of industry clustered up near Cherry Creek. Today, Auraria remains one of the most diverse places in the city, and in order to provide some type of acknowledgement and compensation for the displacement that occurred, the schools do offer a displaced Aurarian scholarship tuition for any student that can prove lineage from a displaced Aurarian, and the institutions are discussing the pursuit of land recognition with Northern Arapaho tribes and ways to better advertise that scholarship. Next slide, Erin. So just to set the context for the place we're discussing today, and you'll hear some of the architects refer back to some of the things I just talked about. Next, I wanted to just touch on our greenhouse gas emissions. So as you can see here, this is our 2019 inventory, remains largely true for today as well. 50% of our emissions come from our buildings. This should say building/energy because that's essentially what we're talking about here. We do have an aging building portfolio, especially amongst those buildings that were built in the 70s. A lot of the institutional buildings popping up are brand new and LEED certified, which is great, but we need to dig in on those older buildings. Then following buildings, we have commuting comprising 32% of emissions, followed by air and landfill waste. So I'm going to dive into each 3 projects just to show you a little taste of what the ASCP works on, starting with everybody's favorite, our library solar array, which was completed in 2019, November of 2019. So Erin's going to play a little drone footage because that's a little more fun than watching or listening to me talk about it. So Erin, if you want to cut it off at like 1:12, that'd be great. Thanks, Erin. So there actually is some really inspiring baseline soundtrack to that. So if you want to watch the whole thing or listen with sound, you can find it on Namaste's YouTube channel and also somewhere on our website. But really awesome project that's allowing us to reduce our emissions through renewable energy. Next slide, Erin. Another really exciting project that gets at that commuting piece of the emissions inventory are brand new covered and secure bike shelters, which were completed just this past fall, actually. So this will add, there's 2 bike shelters in 2 different locations on campus. They are covered in key card access. Each of them has 52 bike spots and I think even some skateboard spots. And these were constructed and designed through a year-long course called the Colorado Building Workshop, which is out of CU Denver's architecture program. So the students designed these. We were the client. They talked to us about building materials, worked really hard to reduce steel and concrete for their higher embodied energy footprint, and then got to build them out themselves. So really the entire process from beginning to end. And they did an incredible job. I haven't had a chance to use them yet myself, but they are up and running. And we're hoping that they'll help combat the concern of bike theft, which is pretty prevalent and a barrier to adopting alternative transportation on campus. Next slide. And then finally, our waste diversion efforts. So as I mentioned earlier, we were able to pass a $3 increase in student fees in order to expand compost campus-wide over the coming year or 2. So we'll be offering infrastructure for collecting organics and post-consumer compostable goods, as well as educational materials to try and help students understand how to sort their waste. So this is a great example of how education and outreach is particularly important in these built spaces to make sure that the spaces are being used efficiently after they are designed and after construction is finished. So this is an image from our 2016 master plan, and it depicts the shared model we use on the Auraria campus. So in gray here, that's any of the shared buildings, which means they're hosting offices, academic spaces, and programming from any of the 3 institutions together. The colored spaces you see are the neighborhoods for each of the 3 institutions. So they're moving more towards having their own pocket of campus with their own identity. And as a state entity in Colorado, we are required by law to build any new building over 25,000 square feet to LEED Gold standards. So any new building on campus will inherently be built more sustainably. We need to work on ensuring that that efficiency maintains over time, but the policy has really helped us with our building-related emissions. And thanks to this mandate, we've been able to experience the evolution of LEED over time here on the Auraria campus. We have 10 LEED certified buildings or projects, and while we're proud of all of them, for the sake of time, we've decided to highlight one from each of the 4 institutions. You can view a comprehensive list of those projects on our website and download LEED scorecards from USGBC. But this slide is really just to show you that the evolution of LEED has been one of continuously raising the bar for certification with the goal of making sustainable construction practices commonplace. And today we'll be discussing earlier iterations of LEED projects, but we're looking forward to having our first version 4 certified project once the residence hall is completed in the fall. So without further ado, I will let the architects tell you about these buildings, and we will be starting it off with the science building with John.
Thanks, Jackie. So as Jackie mentioned, the science building was one of the first, well, was the first building on campus to pursue LEED Gold certification. The LEED, for those of you who don't know, the science building is directly across Spear Boulevard from the Denver Center for Performing Arts on the east side of campus. And it's a combination of an existing building and an addition. Next slide, Eric. So the combined total, about 312,000 square feet, and the budget for the combined total was somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million. It was, at the time, it was a really large project. It came into our office in 2006, and the building opened in January 2010. As I mentioned, this was the first LEED certified gold building on campus. At the time, the state required LEED silver. Next slide. Just project overview. Traditionally, the Auraria campus was very sort of inward focused, these brown brick buildings with ribbon windows. And one of the primary goals from the user groups and owner groups that we spoke to, they wanted to open the building up to the larger city. They wanted to be a participant in the larger city. So the addition to the science building was the first building to sort of jump over this, what had traditionally been this 80-foot wide green belt that surrounded campus. As Jackie mentioned, project is used by 3 separate institutions, Community College of Denver, Metro, and UCD. All 3 of those have their own series of, in this building, biology labs, chemistry labs, earth science labs, math computer labs, as well as faculty offices, and then a whole series of shared spaces, lobbies, cafes, study spaces, and classrooms. Next slide. I think one thing I just wanted to point out for every project, we've kind of organized this, these slides to coincide with the 6 categories on the LEED scorecard. So each project is going to talk about how it addressed sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, indoor environmental quality, and innovation and design. So for the science building, the first thing that I want to talk about is, because Jackie was saying the previous use of this site, anytime you dig in the ground at the Auraria campus, you are going to run into something. We ran into asbestos. And so as part of redeveloping that site, cleaning that site, all of that dirt had to be removed from site. So we were able to achieve, I mean, it's really expensive, but we were able to achieve Brownfield redevelopment credits for doing that. And then the other alternate transportation, campus really, because it has multiple bus, light rail systems, we were able to kind of take advantage of those low-hanging fruit that's already provided by the campus due to its location. At the time this building was constructed in 2008, the standard roof on campus was a built-up roof with red gravel ballast. So we were not able to achieve both of the heat island reducing points, but we did go after the non-roof point. The way we did that was all of the paving around the building is a lighter colored concrete with an SRI, which is a solar reflectance index of less than 29. So to get this point for a non-roof, you had to prove that you had at least 50% of your paving achieve that. We were able to prove that 90% of our hardscape paving achieved that point. Labs are traditionally water and energy hogs, just because of the processes that they go through, the methods of teaching and research and science. So some of the things that people are going to talk about a little later, again, this is 2008, 2009, and 2010 when it was under construction. Some of the things like low flow toilets and faucet sensors were new. And so we were able to sort of use these kind of water efficiency methodologies to improve the water use in the building. And we were able to save about 35% of what would have traditionally been in a standard lab at the time. The energy and atmosphere credits, labs are also really energy hogs. And the primary reason for that is because the chemical use in a science lab building all of the exterior, all of the supply air has to come in 100%. It cannot be recirculated or refiltered and reused. So the air handling units pull in 100% of the outside air, and it has to be either heated or cooled and distributed in the building. And also because of the chemical use, 100% of the exhaust air has to be gathered in return ductwork and exhausted. So one of the systems of working with our mechanical engineers, we were able to select systems that targeted this energy use and targeted energy savings. So we were able to save about 70% over the code minimum at the time, and 28% of the baseline EUI, which is the energy use intensity. Next slide, Aaron. So this image illustrates basically the primary systems to achieve those numbers. The first being a heat recovery system. As I mentioned, all of the exhaust air in the building has to be collected and exhausted. That's, for those familiar with the building, those are those stacks on top of the building that shoot the exhaust air up in the atmosphere. One way of recovering either that heated or cooled air is through the heat recovery system, which takes that residual heating or cooling that's in the existing exhaust air and transfers it into the incoming air to heat or cool that air without reducing energy costs by doing that. We're also, in addition to the chillers that are on the building, we also have an evaporative cooling system, which is essentially a really fancy swamp cooler that introduces atomized air directly into the airstream, and thereby pre-cooling the air system. And then also we have a water side economizer, which, in addition to the chillers, is a way to use that cool air, that cold air, by introducing it into the economizing heat exchanger. Thereby you can turn off the chillers and save energy. Next slide. To further optimize energy performance, we designed the building with a high performance envelope, which essentially, if you peeled away the brick and metal panels, you would see the building completely covered in a 2-inch layer of insulation. Before this, traditionally, insulation might have been in the stud space, but by completely covering the exterior of the building, you reduce that thermal bridging between the studs and the interior of the building, or the structure and exterior of the building. Another way of having high performance envelope is this curtain wall is a double pane insulated, low E coated, thermally broken aluminum curtain wall system, thereby also assisting in energy efficiency of the envelope. Next slide. By renovating the existing science building, which is about 120,000 square foot building, and maintaining most of the exterior and at least half of the interior, we were able to achieve 2 credits for the materials and resources category by reusing the existing building. Our specs and construction documents really outline a path to achieving LEED Gold or any LEED rating. But the waste management portion of this is primarily the responsibility of the general contractor. And in 2008, this was kind of a new thing to gather all the construction waste materials on site, sort it on site, and remove it, and thereby diverting it from landfill. And the contractor on this project, Hazelden, did an amazing job of recycling concrete, gypsum board, masonite, steel, cardboard, all these products that came out of the construction site and diverted them from waste, from landfill. At the science building, the controllability of systems, which is an indoor environmental quality point, or series of points, really starts with the selection of that low E coating that I was mentioning, which reduces the overall heat gain, assisting in thermal comfort. From there, the entire east curtain wall and west curtain walls are, they have automatic shade systems. There are little sensors on the roof of each elevation that control the shades. So in order to take advantage of this large curtain wall, we removed or designed the mechanical systems farther away from the glass so we get a higher ceiling up against the glass, thereby getting more natural light into the building. From there, the light fixtures in rows away from the windows are controlled by both occupancy and daylight sensors. So as natural daylight sort of disappears when the sun moves away from the east elevation, for instance, shades raise and the artificial lighting is turned on in successive rows, thereby ensuing even daylighting or even lighting throughout the day. Next slide. One of the first comments that we heard from the users when we first started design is we don't want another dark building. The existing science building had no natural light in the corridors. It was sort of an interior donut surrounded by laboratories and offices. So there was no natural light in the corridors at all. To achieve these points in LEED, you have to document each space in the building in both plan and section with direct sight lines to exterior windows. So it was a pretty thorough examination of every single space in the building, and we were able to achieve both daylight and view credits by having at least 90%, in our case 91.5% of all spaces in the building had natural access to natural daylight and views. Next slide, Aaron. And then for one of our design and innovation credits, because, as I was saying, LEED at the time was very new to campus, certainly new to Denver, we worked with our LEED consultants and the Auraria Science had a committee, and also AHEC to kind of introduce the topic, LEED in general, to the general public, but also through a systems of signage and a self-guided tour, describe in detail how recycling, commissioning, water reduction, alternate energy methods all contribute to or experience or reduce, the environmental impact of the built environment. So I think David is going to go through CCD Confluence Building. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So CCD, as you may know, is on the south end of campus. Their neighborhood is along Colfax from Spear west. And this project, we want to change the slide quickly here, was a collaboration between Oz and Bora Architects out of Portland. It was built in 2013, cost of about $28 million. And on the next slide, you'll see we achieved LEED Gold certification on the project. And this is under version 2009, so this is one LEED generation newer than the project that John just presented. And it's interesting to note that, LEED continues to raise the bar with newer versions of the system that they put out. And truly is achieving market transformation. I think you'll hear about some strategies on these projects that were innovative at the time, but are becoming more and more commonplace today. So a little bit about the building. On the next slide, you'll see that when we came to the project, CCD occupied the technology building, which is now Boulder Creek, and the South Classroom building, which is Cherry Creek. And we worked with them to consider how they might capitalize on the neighborhood that they've been given. The original thinking for the project was they would go on Lot M adjacent to Spear, but when we started thinking about the size and the area required to really fulfill the project's mission, it became apparent that moving the building to the western edge of their campus and thinking about a connecting link that even brought students through the 9th Street Historic Park to that facility made a lot of sense. The way the building is organized, on the next slide you'll see that the building was all about providing easy, intuitive access to services for students. And to some degree, raising the profile of the CCD institution to put it on par with the other institutions on campus. When this project began, they were in the South Classroom building, which was very difficult to navigate and didn't really create that sense of home that the students really needed. So first floor is all about student services. Second floor is classrooms, offices on the third floor, and the top level intentionally puts the academic success center and the tutoring facilities and those that really need the help on campus at a very prominent location that captures some great views both to downtown and east to the mountains or west to the mountains. Also, I'll be introducing a cafe and a welcome hall on the first floor, really providing a broader resource for the campus as a whole, in addition to providing a home for the CCD students. So to some of the lead categories, sustainable sites, as John mentioned, relatively easy to achieve many points in this category on an urban campus. I mean, we're close to transportation, we're close to community services, those sorts of things. What's unique here is that we did have access to some significant open space in the course of locating our building. And so really maximizing open spaces is one you might not see as often on an urban site like this, but we were able to achieve. Another thing we did on the next slide is really think about maximizing that open space, but also using that as a home for students. Again, with the interest of creating a living room inside the building, creating a campus quad that students could really engage in. And we thought about that strategically both for this building and its immediate construction, but also for potential future development of this site as the building, if CCD needs to expand, they could do it in such a way that kind of preserves this site. So next slide about water efficiency. Obviously, strategies like low flow fixtures, not waterless, but low flow fixtures, we had a lot of conversation about that in the design phase. It allowed us to achieve good water efficiency inside the building. And next slide, outside the building, being very intentional about using native vegetation and low water use plantings on the site. And here you'll note we also, we've got some contrasting paving patterns. We're very strategic to provide reflectivity to the extent that we're limiting our development of a heat island in this quad as well. So moving to the energy and atmosphere point, this building took a little different approach to glazing than John's building, the science building, in that one of the missions for this project was not necessarily to showcase the interior of the building to engage with SPEAR, right? This is a different location on campus and different priorities. So our mission here was to create graceful interior spaces that capitalized on daylight, particularly in the locations where students were gathering and assembling. And so we were pretty strategic about the deployment of large expanses of glass versus punched openings to really manage our window to wall ratio on the project. The result here was that we were about 49% of annual energy cost savings. And, we were we were the first project we're the largest rebate under the Energy Design Assistance Program that Excel had to date when this project was built. I'm sure they've achieved greater success with that program going forward, but at the time it was quite an achievement. With the strategic use of glazing, we also had to pay close attention to shading so that we weren't introducing glare where we had glazing. And this is one of the few classrooms that actually it's above the south entry and it capitalizes on the large expanse of glass in the building's composition. So carefully integrating shading and overhangs to limit the glare impacts. On the next slide, we'll talk about materials and resources. And this is a category where that market transformation may be most obvious. It's a lot easier today to find products with recycled materials, certified wood, and the like. Regional materials, we're fortunate in this area to have access to masonry, concrete, even dripboard, which is extracted and produced locally. So we were able to achieve pretty high marks in these points as well. Construction waste recycling also, back 10 years ago, we were looking for opportunities or people who would take drywall, for example, and now it's easier as projects are executed to recycle and keep that out of the waste stream. So next slide, talk a little bit about innovation points. The one that comes to mind is really the notion that we doubled the open space requirement on this project, and I mentioned that earlier in the site selection category. To the extent that we're also doing this in the interest of the project's mission, creating that campus quad or that outdoor space that students could gather and take advantage of and use in their day-to-day. In fact, we located it in such a way that it took advantage of the gap in buildings at 9th Street's Historic Park as well to kind of commandeer or give the perception of even more site area than we were given. And we also introduced a green roof on the on the roof of the lower portion of the building, both to limit the heat island and help to manage water, but also to provide a reasonable view out of the stories above, the third and fourth floor that look out over it, so that experience wasn't compromised by a rooftop in that location. So beyond the lead, I want to talk a little bit about Synergies, because this project was really a case of engineers, contractors, estimators, and architects working together to find synergies between decisions. And in many cases, our mantra was, let's find solutions that solve more than one problem. And so as we continue through some of the thinking there, even on the next slide, you'll see we were at the very beginning thinking about how the building siting and massing could respond to the climate in a way that limits its energy appetite. Studying different options for orientation and massing allowed us to understand which configuration was going to generate the largest or smallest heating load, cooling load, et cetera. And that was a data point that helped us decide how to configure the building, in addition to thinking about the student experience in relationship to campus design guidelines and the like. We also, on the next slide, looked at building systems for efficiency and synergies as well. In the case of this project, we went with an active chilled beam system. And chilled beams are a means of delivering cooling to the building and separating that from the delivery of ventilation to the spaces. And so the beams create some convection, and they allow hot and cold water to change the temperature of the air as air convects through them, but also provide a bit of ventilation air through them. And the result was that we had a more compact system, and therefore less space required in the plenum to accommodate the system. It also provides, in the interest of synergies, it provides a quiet and comfortable and flexible system to deliver heating and cooling. We also dove into some of the client's equipment expectations. They were on the verge of migrating to a thin client system, which is like the remote desktop system you might see today, but not quite ready to invest in that. When we got into this building design and noted that if we migrated to that system sooner, we'd have less of a equipment-generated heat load inside the building, and therefore could calibrate the mechanical systems a little more specifically, saving the project money, saving the project energy. And so we were able to work with the overall project budget to find a way to generate savings from that decision to help them fund that migration to different technology. I mentioned envelope efficiencies. That chilled beam system reduced the floor-to-floor height need by about 8 inches per floor. And if you can imagine, that saves on 8 inches of brick around the perimeter of the building. So we're reducing our demand of materials. It also reduces the envelope, the heat loss through that envelope, right? Because that much fewer square footage we're exposing to that heat loss. So that brought a lot of different sort of synergies and benefits to the project. We also, at the time, spray foam insulation wasn't as commonplace, and we got into the notion of trying to use it in the interest of creating a tighter, more energy efficient envelope. So we did our research and found a spray foam system that could be doubling as both insulation and a weather barrier. And so by eliminating the need for a contractor to apply Tyvek to the entire perimeter of the building and then come back and put insulation on board of that, we're able to save a bit of money. Didn't quite pay for the spray foam entirely, but it helped offset that increased cost, and the result was a much better performing envelope. The next slide. We taught another great synergy on this project is the use of triple element glazing. The glazing in our building has 3 panes of glass in section. It's also got a low E coating. And windows are the biggest contributor to heat loss in an envelope. So the more you can limit that through the use of shading devices and high-performing glass, the better off your building is going to be from an energy standpoint. That decision, the glass cost more money, but it did offset some of the mechanical costs because the mechanical systems had less load and therefore could be smaller. But another synergy is that it provided great acoustic benefits. This was a really noisy site adjacent to light rail and Colfax. And if you've ever been in some of the spaces in this building, you'll see how incredibly quiet it is as a result of that glazing system. So the last thing I'll touch on here is this notion of active design guidelines. Well building wasn't on the market at this time, but we were thinking about ways we could encourage wellness in the building. And, for example, the stair that connects the levels of the building could have been just a simple fire escape, right? But we decided to make it generous and large enough for people to circulate and interact with one another along. We featured it with a yellow wall and really raised its profile. And the elevators are similarly accessible, but they're less visible. They're behind the welcome desk. So you can use them if you need them, but you're encouraged to take the stairs and get your steps in and encourage wellness in your daily use of the building. And I could keep talking, but I'll stop there and turn the mic over to Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'm going to go through the MSU Denver Aerospace and Engineering Sciences building. It's located on Auraria Parkway. Auraria Parkway sits just to the north of the building, and the ball arena is right across the street from it. So the Aerospace and Engineering Sciences building was completed in 2018. It was completed for a construction cost of $366 a square foot, as you can see here, which is a very low cost for a lab building. The lab systems are so expensive it tends to drive costs up. But despite that low budget, it's a project that has a number of high aspirations, both programmatically and in terms of building performance. Like the Confluence building, the project was able to achieve LEED Gold under the 2009 version. And then working with Ambient Energy, who is a tenant in the building, we were also able to achieve WELL certification for their space. And LEED is really more focused on the building's impact on the environment, whereas WELL is more focused on the building's impact on human physiological systems. And there were some cases where we were able to leverage some points from LEED to make the WELL certification a little easier. But it's a big achievement. WELL is, our certification is only one of 6 WELL certified projects in the state. Many of you probably know Metro has been a primary support institution for our city for 50 years. It's a strong community partner, and that's evidenced by the fact that 46% of the student population are students of color, 56% are first-generation students. The cost per credit is one of the lowest costs in the state. It's also the only access institution in the state, public access institution, which means that if you have a high school degree, you are guaranteed access enrollment in the school. And the Aerospace project was really a chance for the university to connect that tradition of community support with this vibrant aerospace economy in the state. The state has the second largest aerospace economy in the country. So it's a way of getting particularly underserved populations access to those high-paying jobs in the aerospace economy. And that idea of working with industry is something that has been a recent tradition of Metro's. In many different cases, Metro has gone to industry and asked, what are the skills gaps that the industry sees, and where can the university help to prepare students to fill those gaps? And in the case of the Aerospace project, that resulted in the first true Bachelor of Science in Advanced Manufacturing in the country, which is housed in the Aerospace building. The project started really in 2011 through some economic initiatives that came out of the Obama administration. And there were a series of them, but there was one about aerospace, another one about advanced manufacturing. And Metro was able to combine both of those in this project. You can see that the building consists of a variety of different spatial types. There's labs, classrooms, offices. And then the top floor, shown in purple there, consists primarily of tenant spaces. Those are mostly occupied by startups, and the benefit to those companies is they can use some pretty expensive testing equipment that's on the first floor that they wouldn't have otherwise had access to. And the university gets the benefit of being able to place students in those companies and get firsthand experience. You've seen this kind of idea of using the campus location near downtown and leveraging many of the different kind of infrastructure qualities to gain the sustainability sites points. You've seen these in other projects. I think of LEED, one of the big benefits to LEED is it gives us a framework for us to be able to work with owners to find those points that are really pragmatic to pursue, and that was the case here. Things like bicycle parking and electric vehicles charging stations just make sense because of the interconnectivity of this site with the rest of the city. And another example of that pragmatic approach is in the heat island effect. We have a white roof on this building, and that certainly reduces heat island effect, but it also means lower utility costs for the university because less heat is gained through the roof. Another area where heat island effect is reduced is at this pedestrian plaza, where the introduction of trees and light-colored paving just makes it a more pleasant place to be, in addition to reducing the heat effect on the environment. John mentioned the fact that all lab buildings are energy hogs because of the way that we have to use 100% outside air. But one of the benefits to that is that the ventilation, the amount of ventilation is increased because so much of that outside air is introduced into the building on a regular basis. And that means healthier indoor environments. And that was one of the points that we were able to leverage with ambient to gain that WELL certification. This is the ambient space here on the right. And then, David was talking about the market transformation that LEED has engendered in our industry. And I think of this as one example. We have wood as a primary accent material in the project. And because, I think of it primarily because of LEED, the availability of FSC certified wood was such that we were able to get almost all of our wood to be FSC certified. So it's an achievement where we're able to really demonstrate sustainability through the fact that basically every wood surface you see in the building is FSC certified wood. And one point that was maybe not quite as low-hanging fruit, maybe as some of the previous ones, was the stormwater management point. Any project on the Auraria campus needs to deal with stormwater management on its own, and that's because there is no campus-wide stormwater management plan. There's no overall stormwater detention pond, for instance, for the campus. And for the aerospace project, this was very challenging because the building fills so much of the site. There's not enough room on the site to accommodate a conventional pond. So instead, we have a tank, and 100% of the rainwater that falls on the site is collected, filtered through rain gardens, collected into the tank, and then from there slowly released into the city's stormwater system. And rather than just simply burying that tank, we've used it as our pedestrian plaza, so that the tank lid basically is the surface of the plaza. And finally, I would say probably our most nuanced but most impactful sustainability strategy has to do with this point of energy reduction. We were able to achieve 18%, as this shows, below code. And then this 84% number, that's relative to the American Institute of Architects' kind of progressive goals towards hitting net zero by 2030. So at the time that this project was completed, 2018, this 84% reduction is putting us on target towards progressively hitting that net zero goal of 2030. And energy reduction really involves optimizing a whole series of different building systems. As you can see here, and maybe just one example, this idea of conditioning at the source. This project is a cooling-dominated building, and that's because the lab equipment gives off so much heat. And rather than using air to kind of move cool energy throughout the building, we're using chilled water, which is a much more efficient means of moving energy. And we're moving chilled water to the labs. At the labs, there are fan coil units that blow air across the chilled water, and that delivers cooling right where it's needed the most. So it's a very almost kind of surgical way of delivering cool air at the places where it's needed. And then another example of kind of optimizing a building system is in the dust collection system. Traditionally, these dust collection systems run at 100% capacity, whether there's one piece of equipment or 10 that are turned on. Here at the Aerospace building, it's a variable air volume system, and that means that it ramps up gradually as more and more pieces of equipment are turned on. And then the final area where we were able to really optimize energy performance was in the envelope. And for us, that had to do with careful placement of the programmatic components based on the kinds of heat that those programmatic components could withstand based on their envelope location. And this image shows the offices which we placed on the south side of the building, and that's because that allows us to have smaller apertures there and less heat gain. That also allows or takes advantage of the fact that people in the offices, there's a greater chance that they'll be able to close their shades and keep out heat based on that. And that means that the north side of the building, we're able to place the labs, and that allows for this really wonderful glare-free daylight during the day, which means that during the day the lights are usually not, you don't have to turn them on. And then at night, those labs become this beacon, which is a way of kind of showcasing the activity of the building to people who are coming to Auraria right across the street. We do have some west-facing glass in the building, and that's we think of that as kind of the Colorado conundrum for architects working in the Front Range, and that's because we all want the views to the west because that's where the mountains are, and there's even some health benefits to connecting to nature in that way. But that does mean heat gain, is that particularly in the summertime when the sun gets low. And so we use a number of strategies. There's some high-performance glazing. For us, we use something called ceramic fritting, which are these little dots on the glass that keep out heat. We have vertical fins that shade the glass during the early afternoon hours. And then there's also a series of motorized shades that are connected to a solar sensor. So as the sun wraps around to this west side, shades drop, and it's again a way of minimizing the heat gain through that western exposure. Hand it off to Stefan here.
Hey everyone, and to round it off, the CU Denver Lowell and Rob Salazar Student Wellness Center is located right on the corner of Spear and Auraria Parkway. So the gateway into the campus, and in many cases the gateway into downtown. Like so many buildings on this campus, the connection into downtown was really a critical factor. If you go to the next slide. To introduce this project and its genesis, this project is a student-funded, student-led, student-organized project. Its genesis came from a group of really ambitious students within the student government of CU Denver, galvanized the student body to demand a place for them, a home for them, a wellness center for them. And those are the beginning points. And so many of these other projects have talked about the synergies and the beginning points, and I think this project is no different. Very unique to this institution is that it is led by the students. If you go to the next slide. So achieved LEED Gold under 2009. Its location and project overview, I had mentioned it's right on the corner of Spear Boulevard and Auraria Parkway, and a gateway into both downtown and the campus. Because of its high visibility, it really needed to serve as a beacon, or the desire was to serve as a beacon for the university on this neighborhood and on this campus. So there's this front yard aspect that we were calling Spear Boulevard. But then really there's this more backyard aspect, which is the courtyard and the area between that forms the courtyard with the Student Commons building just to its south. Go to the next slide. The program within the building is all dedicated to all facets of wellness. There's of course a lot of these traditional spaces you might find in a rec center. Pools, a 3-court gym, fitness, but there's a lot of really unique aspects to it. Lining the building's perimeter and circulation core with study space, cafe space, a teaching kitchen was really a primary goal and a value embedded into the project with students. A 55-foot rock climbing wall, men's and women's lockers that could serve significant amounts of students coming into this building, but also beyond that, a number of individual changing rooms and shower rooms for gender non-binary and non-conforming genders was really a fundamental part of this building. So equity and inclusion being embedded into this building. There's a bicycle shop for repairs and an outdoor pursuits area, wellness staff, administration, mental health services are just a few. So we'll get into more of those details later, but really a building dedicated to wellness. On the Sustainable Sites credit, we achieved all this list of credits on the right. Being such a urban campus and downtown, taking advantage of the alternative transportation options available, and reducing the heat island effect, the brownfield redevelopment, all credits that were fairly easy to achieve and really embedded within the logic of the site, which I think that why this site selection for the wellness building is a credit to both the university and the planning for the project. Next slide. To begin with the Brownfield Sites, Jackie had mentioned, and John, about any time you build on an Auraria campus, you're dealing with a whole history of use. If you go to the next slide. So we were able to achieve this credit by removing 8,500 cubic yards of coal ash soil is what was discovered on this site. And so cleaning that up through site excavation, removing that dirt, and putting it to a certified landfill that could handle this. So remediation of our downtown area was a big win, a costly endeavor, but certainly allowed us to achieve this credit. Go to the next slide. The heat island effect on this project was achieved both by the white roof, but also through the plaza materials. And just wanted to mention that the plaza materials are an extension of the limestone and the tan-colored masonry that's part of the characteristic and material palette of the project, and turning that sideways to become the plaza. Next slide. Maybe not as much of a water hog as a lab building, but certainly within that spectrum, you can imagine with a building that's open from early in the morning, 6 a.m. to even past 10 p.m. at night, the use of this building is very heavy. So we were able to achieve a really impressive savings on water just through these very standard fixture savings, low flow toilets, lavatory showers, and efficient irrigation and faucet sensors. So really using some of these, what are becoming more standard features of water savings on this particular building, because it's so faucet, shower, water heavy, we were able to really see a significant savings. Next slide. The stormwater management within the site was also an important aspect, very similar to the way Aaron described the Metro AES building. An underwater vault was utilized, and in the building of CU Denver Commons, which was also a project of Anderson Mason Dale, future planning already occurred to size an underground detention vault to be able to handle the CU Denver Wellness Center. So that was really significant and had a lot of foresight on past projects, feeding current projects and new projects as a campus. But beyond that, there were still some areas that we needed to achieve water quality. So within all these leftover spaces and manipulating the building, we were able to fit in a rain garden and, of course, the large plaza, the ceremonial backyard heart of CU Denver's campus with these permeable hardscape plaza. Next slide. Just a quick overview. I won't go into the detail on this bar chart, but it kind of gives you a sense of where you find where on this project there's a lot of savings, and there's a story embedded within this bar chart, of course. But the most significant savings is in the internal lighting. All the daylighting and occupancy sensors, we were able to take advantage of lighting, even for a building that's open, has really long hours, operational hours. And then, of course, space heating. I'll get into a bit more of the aspects of space heating, but in a wellness building, you're able to put the set point much higher as long as you provide a lot of air circulation in places like the gym and the fitness areas. And you imagine convective cooling when you're sweating, even if it's 76, 78 degrees, that actually feels comfortable in your workout clothes as long as you have air movement around you. Next slide. So as I was alluding to, that high set point there was a significant factor in achieving a lot of the energy savings. We'll get into some of the high performance envelope aspects here soon. And similar to other projects, particularly at the pool, there's a lot of ventilation and fresh air, and you have to vent 100% of existing air within pools, which makes sense. You can't be breathing in all that chlorine. And so getting heat recovery on that aspect. And finally, just want to note, being able to have 3 dedicated mechanical units and air handling units allowed each portion of the building to really be dialed into each specific area. So one dedicated to the gym, one to the pool, and then one to the balance of the building. Next slide. On the high performance envelope, similar to what Aaron was describing on Metro, there was a desire to have large expanses of glass to become a beacon for downtown, but we were able to situate and establish the diagram of the building and this showcased rock climbing wall on the north edge. So our largest expanses of glass that are unprotected are facing north, which has significant impact on your heat gain. Next slide. And similarly on the south, any large expanse of glass, we really tried hard to protect from the elements with large overhangs, protect from solar gain, and also has the aspect of creating more of a porch-like feel and area, identifying the entry and really focusing student activity onto the plaza. Next slide. Quickly going over some of the materials and resources. Really, being a steel building, we were able to expose a lot of the structure and have minimal industrial interior finishes. We were able to achieve a lot of recycled content with both steel, but also with the reclaimed wood. Next slide on this one. Similarly, being a wellness building, the adhesives, sealants, paints, and coating, we were able to make sure there were no VOCs in this build. All materials with low VOC. Next slide. So that brings us to, even though this building did not pursue the WELL Build certificate, it is fully dedicated to wellness. And here's just a few of the programs that were integrated, and I had mentioned the meditation room and napping room, counseling and fitness assessment being a really important aspect. Outdoor access and education is for this campus in particular, allowing people to get outdoors who never had access, being able to rent gear, get advice, and then food access and food justice, even trying to include a food pantry for those with food insecurity. So a building that really is programmed to get beyond just a building for wellness, but all aspects of wellness. Next slide. Here's just a few images of the interior that describe some of those programs. How about that nap pod? I want to be there right now. And finally, just to conclude and wrap things up, this project, its great success, I think, did stem from the Synergies and collaborative integrated process that LEED is so good at encouraging and allowing teams to explore with all stakeholders and all design partners and users. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So we are at our Q&A time. Most of the questions did get answered in the chat throughout the presentation, so thank you, presenters, for being on top of that. We do have one here from Renee. First of all, she says, great job, everyone. She had a question for Jackie. You mentioned the HPCP requirements, which is leading to all these great LEED Gold new construction projects. What existing building policies or goals are you working on at the campus?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Renee. It's a great question. We've been discussing this with our building subcommittee through our climate action planning efforts. And we don't have existing policies to my knowledge right now, but we've discussed recertifying the buildings through LEED O&M checklist, establishing a policy for recommissioning or retro-commissioning of our buildings once they've reached a certain age, or using Energy Star EUI benchmarking to try and benchmark the buildings and then develop a target goal for the percent above baseline we want to achieve as compared with, Energy Star buildings for that building use type. So nothing set in stone yet, but we would certainly welcome your thoughts as we work through that conversation with the building subcommittee.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm sorry I didn't see you had answered that in the chat.
Literally
so thanks for
answered
answering that twice.
as you were talking, so no worries.
We've got another one from David here. For all presenters, was the landscaping geared towards pollinators? Native planting is great, but would love to hear if thought was given to pollinators.
Boy, as a beekeeper myself, I'll comment that we didn't actually consider pollinators specifically in the design at CCD, but that is something that's finding its way more and more into our thinking as we consider landscapes today.
Yeah, I can comment on that. That the having a diversity of landscape and landscape material to attract pollinators really is becoming a push for a lot of our landscape partners in these projects. CU Denver Wellness did have a few, tried to have a diverse variety of perennials in the limited space that it could. But I would say it could probably go the next mile.
Cool. And that's awesome that you are a beekeeper, David. I did not know that. All right. Any other questions? We've got a couple minutes remaining. If there aren't any more questions, we can go ahead and give you all 4 minutes back to your day. But I will say we are going to stick around. If anyone wants to stick around and do a little bit of virtual networking, we'd love to have you stay, and we'll switch you all over so that you can put your video on and you can chat with us and say hi. We'd love to say hi to you. Oh, it looks like we had another question come in from Charlie. What level of success have you had in engaging the student body and faculty in the sustainability performance and features of the building?
Yeah, that's probably a question for me. So, Charlie, I'm not in all of these buildings. I work in the Tivoli Student Union, but we started a program that launched right before COVID hit, unfortunately, a Green Offices program, where offices that sit within any of these buildings or any of the older shared buildings on campus can fill out a checklist, kind of like LEED, for their office that includes both the built environment, resource conservation, and also just sustainable behaviors, how they get to and from the office, how they do errands, waste, and they can become certified green office with different tiers. Unfortunately, when we were about to really roll that out, COVID hit, and we do not really have people occupying these buildings anymore, but that's one way that we are working on that. The signage that John mentioned in the science building, we probably need to work on updating that. We are working on updating our signage right now, actually across campus, but I think some more of those guides in the lead buildings to help point out the features would be great as well. And I think, Andy, there was a question earlier about if the presentation would be available.
Yep, I just in a chat. I just was saying I'll double check with the presenters, make sure you guys are okay with us providing a copy. And if so, we can definitely share that out. We are also recording this, and I think we're going to try to figure out how to get this presentation hosted on the Auraria campus website. Is that right, Jackie?
I would love to do that if the presenters are open to it, because I know that our campus community would love this information. So yeah, awesome. I can include that and follow up to you to send to the panelists if we end up doing, or the attendees if we end up doing that.
Awesome. So we had another question regarding life cycle costing process. What was the life cycle costing process with the client, particularly in relation to the energy consumption?
I could start on that one. I probably at least the three most recent of these projects probably all went through energy modeling. I'm not sure, John, if science did. It sounds like it did. Yeah. So so all the projects went through a process of modeling energy use and then working through a series of different options of maybe improving a mechanical system might have a certain first cost and looking at what the payoff to doing that would be over a period of time. And so we use those kinds of lists to go through with our owners to decide which strategies make the most sense. It's again kind of what is the most pragmatic. What are the things that are really going to make the biggest bang for the buck?
Great, and we are at time, so anyone who has to jump off, that's fine. We do have a few more questions, so presenters, if you're okay with sticking around for a few more minutes, maybe we can get through these last couple of questions. So one from Christine is, did the Student Center utilize spray foam insulation in the wall assemblies similar to the science building?
Okay. And by that, I'm assuming you mean the Student Wellness Center? If you do, in the Student Wellness Center, yes, we did use spray foam insulation in the wall cavity for that wall assembly. So it did have a very similar high performance envelope on that particular project.
Awesome, thanks, Stefan. A question from Jenna. What design changes are you contemplating regarding interior or exterior spaces, given the likelihood of continued physical distancing and also reduced occupancy due to shifts to working from home more?
You know, I'll mention that we often plan buildings on higher ed campuses, and we think about the long-term investment in that building. It's a 50 or 100-year building, and I'd like to think that COVID is a blip in the radar. Having said that, it highlights the need for flexibility and adaptability of our buildings. And so I would say that the proposed design changes related to COVID are maybe bringing a little more intentionality behind thinking about, you know, one-way routes through the building that could be harnessed if they need to for social distancing, or multi-purpose and flexibility in layouts so that we can adapt more readily should such a situation arise in the future. Also considering ventilation systems and providing higher air quality.
One of the things I'm seeing is kind of more emphasis on those spaces that are meant for socialization, the places that are whose purpose is to bring people together for teaching or for student lounge kinds of spaces. Those are the spaces that are the highest priority, whereas spaces that are more for individual use, like offices, where people are proving now that work can be done at home, those are becoming de-emphasized as we're working forward a new program plan.
Awesome. Maria, did I get all of those questions. They all came in at the same time, so sorry if we missed anybody.
I think that we've covered everything that was in the chat.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you to all of our presenters for all the time you put into this presentation. It was a really exciting and interesting thing to just get to know one of the local projects and its positive impact on our community. So thank you all so much, and hope everyone has a great rest of your week. And stick around if you want to network a little bit.
Thanks for organizing this.